Today I'm talking about Brian Jones, the founder of the Rolling Stones, who died on the 2nd of July 1969 at the age of 27. Brian Jones was the founder of the British rock band, the Rolling Stones. He also thought up the name and was one of the guitarists and harmonica players in the band. He was born Lewis Brian Hopkin Jones in Cheltenham, Gloucestershire, on the 28th of February 1942. His parents were Lewis and Louisa Jones, who were both musical. He had two younger sisters, Pamela and Barbara. Brian moved to London and placed an advertisement for musicians in an edition of Jazz News in 1962. Ian Stewart responded. Mick Jagger joined the band and brought Keith Richards along after meeting Brian through the music scene. The first Rolling Stones lineup consisted of Brian, Mick Jagger, Bill Wyman, Charlie Watts, Keith Richards and Ian Stewart. Mick Jagger, as the singer of the band, soon became the most famous member and considered the leader by the British press. This took the limelight away from Brian, which he didn't appreciate. Here is a photo of them without Ian. Mick was also close friends with Charlie and Keith. Brian, who soon got caught up in the grips of a drug addiction, became more and more isolated from the other members. He felt his isolation even more when in March 1967 his girlfriend of 2 years, Anita Pallenberg, left him for Keith, and Mick and Keith, Mick's childhood friend, formed a songwriting partnership to create many of the band's hits. Because of Brian's drug dependency and inability to play and perform, he was fired from the group and replaced by Mick Taylor. Here he is with photographer Michael Cooper. In November 1968, he bought a property called Cochford Farm, located at Cochford Lane, Hartfield, East Sussex. He wanted to do renovation work on it, and so he hired a builder called Frank Thorogood. Frank had carried out work on Keith's home. Brian was upset when a beam collapsed, and so he fired him. According to Brian's girlfriend, Anna Wohlin, Frank had been stealing money from Brian by exaggerating the prices for the building materials and the work that was being done at the farm, and Brian had found that out as well. Brian had second thoughts about firing Frank and invited him over for a drink and a swim that same day on the 2nd of July 1969. Frank lived in the flat above the garage at the farm. Janet Lawson, who was a nurse, was also at the flat. Janet was the girlfriend of Tom Keylock, the Stones' tour manager. Frank and Janet came over to the house. Brian placed his inhaler by the side of the pool as he suffered from asthma. Both he and Frank got into the outside pool. Anna wrote in her book, The Murder of Brian Jones, that Brian was teasing Frank about having more money than him and calling him old. She said they both had pushed each other's head underneath the water and were engaging in horseplay. Anna was called to the telephone and left the pool area. She went to her bedroom to take the call. Janet said Brian had asked her to get his inhaler, so this differs from Anna, who said the inhaler was placed by the pool, but I suppose it could have been moved at some point during the evening. So both Anna and Janet were out of the pool and didn't see what happened. While Anna was on the telephone, Janet shouted to her that something had happened to Brian. Anna went downstairs and saw Frank standing inside the house shaking. In an interview, Janet said the same thing, that Frank was inside the house and was shaking. Anna and Janet discovered Brian at the bottom of the pool. Anna dived in to help him. Anna and Janet said that Frank was slow to help, but he eventually got into the pool and helped Anna pull Brian out. Janet performed heart massage on Brian as Anna was performing CPR while they waited for an ambulance to arrive, but he was declared dead. This was just short of a month after he had been fired from the Rolling Stones. The coroner recorded it as death by misadventure. An interesting fact is that author A.A. Milne formerly owned Cochford Farm, and this is where he wrote his Winnie the Pooh stories. In 1993, when he was dying from cancer, Frank Thorogood apparently confessed to Tom Keylock, the band's tour manager, that he had been responsible for Brian's death. In 2009, on the 40th anniversary of Brian's death, Sussex police reviewed the case because of the murder theory. Sussex police later concluded that there wasn't any new evidence that justified the reopening of the case. An interesting twist to the story is the attack on Joan Fitzsimmons, which Scott Jones reported about in a Daily Mail article in 2008. She was married, but she was the on-off girlfriend of Frank Thorogood, who was also married. She was a taxi driver and friends with Janet Lawson and Tom Keylock. She knew the Stones and Brian. On the 26th of July 1969, over 3 weeks after Brian's demise, Joan, who was 29 years old at the time, was assaulted near to Chichester in West Sussex. She suffered a fractured skull and was blinded, which was permanent. There is a rumour that she was going to speak to the media about what she knew. Frank had an alibi for when it happened, but was this the truth or a lie? She was dating a Jordanian man named Michael Zayadeh at the time. He pleaded guilty and spent 4 years in Broadmoor, the high-security psychiatric hospital in Berkshire. When he was released, he was deported, but he claimed he didn't do it, even though he pleaded guilty. And she died in 2002. On the autopsy report, the date of death was recorded as the 2nd of July 1969, as he was last seen around 11:30 p.m. that night. Other places record it as the 3rd of July when he passed. Even though he was only 27 years old, it seemed he was in trouble, as his autopsy states he had severe liver dysfunction due to fatty degeneration and ingestion of alcohol and drugs. The cause of death is drowning, caused by swimming whilst under the influence of alcohol and drugs. The autopsy also says that there were no injuries to Brian's body. He is buried in Cheltenham Cemetery and Crematorium, Bouncers Lane, Cheltenham, Gloucestershire, England. You can book to stay at Cochford Farm for a holiday if you are a true Brian Jones's fan or a Winnie the Pooh fan. I'll put the link in the description box underneath the video. I hope you enjoyed that. It was very sad, wasn't it? If you like this video, please like, share, subscribe, press the notification bell. And I'll see you in the next one. Happy New Year!